All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Applied Theater Interventions for Critical Social Work Praxis, US and India Context, the final session of the winter edition of Building Healthy, Strong Communities. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes. If you wish to receive CEs for today's webinar, you will need to stay for the duration of the event and respond to all the poll questions you see pop up throughout the presentation. If you do not see the polls pop up, we will make sure we read the question and give you all the response options, and you can put your answer in the chat. We will have time for Q&A at the end of today's presentation. If you have questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. We encourage participation in the chat throughout today's presentation. I am now going to turn it over to Joe Yaffe, the Secretary of the SSW Alumni Board, to introduce this session's presenters.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our session today. And it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists for today. And Candace Christensen is an associate professor at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. Their research consists of critical feminist approaches to community-engaged, qualitative, and arts-based research methodologies that prevent and respond to gendered, racial, and anti-LGBTQ plus violence. Their commitment to these approaches is grounded in their positionalities as femme, genderqueer, polysexual, artist activist, and survivor of sexual violence. Candace's career aim is to deconstruct paradigms and practices that perpetuate power-based violence and build cultures focused on self-determination, a sense of connection, and mutual empowerment. Their recent work focuses on queer and trans youth development, specifically how organizations can foster joy, a sense of belonging, and mutual empowerment for youth. Another key focus is using photo voice for evaluation as an intervention and as a tool for educating social work students. Christensen also has experience in using theater of the oppressed to construct sexual violence prevention interventions. They are excited to continue with arts-based social justice research projects that prevent violence and build life-affirming cultures. Candace has experience with community-based art and theater projects, activism focused on sexual violence prevention, queer liberation, and racial justice, and helping students to identify, implement, and assess creative approaches to social work practice. Candace holds a BA in Theater and Literature from the University of Texas at Dallas, and an MSW and PhD from the University of Utah, where I had the pleasure of being on the faculty. Apara Sharma is an MSW student on interpersonal practice in integrated health, mental health, and substance abuse pathway. She graduated from Mount Holyoke College in 2021, where she obtained her BA in anthropology and psychology. Her current work centers on restorative justice, accountability processes, and community-based responses to sexual and gender-based harm within the sexual and gender-based misconduct response portfolio at the Office of Student Conflict Resolution on the University of Michigan campus. She facilitates dialogue, educational workshops, and resolution pathways that prioritize dignity, accountability, and meaningful repair. Sorry about stumbling over that.
That was great, Joe. Thank you. Goodness. All right. Well, I think Apar and I are very excited to be here today and excited to have so many people in attendance. So we will get this show on the road. I'm going to share my screen and let me okay. Can you all see the slides okay? They look good. Okay, wonderful. All right. And Joe Yaffe, Professor Yaffe, thank you for the introduction. It already gave a title, introduced our title. So I'll turn it over to Apara.
Thank you so much, Dr. C. I'm going to start us off with a land and labor acknowledgement. We gather on the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe peoples, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and the Potawatomi nations, whose relationship to this land was never ceded and continues today. We also acknowledge that this region was built on the forced labor of enslaved African peoples, whose descendants remain part of this community. As we engage in work towards liberation and justice, we honor these ongoing legacies and commit to action beyond acknowledgement.
Thank you, Apara. So Kelly, you raised your hand. Do you have a question? Everything okay? Done. Okay, we'll keep going. Rock and roll. Okay. Okay, so you got to learn about a few of my positionalities, but as qualitative researchers, our lived positions, our standpoints shape the work that we do. And so I just like to be transparent about where I am positioned. So I am Candace. I use they, them pronouns. I identify as white, femme, genderqueer, abrosexual, an artist activist, and survivor of sexual violence. And all these identities have shaped my commitment to applied theater as a practice of healing, resistance, and collective liberation. Apara.
Thank you. My name is Apara, she, her pronouns. I am a South Asian international student and genderqueer. These identities have shaped how I gain access to and understand and exist in the spaces, particularly higher education spaces where I work and serve students.
All right. Before we get started, I need to acknowledge the support of folks and agencies without which this research, this presentation would not be possible. So first, the Institute for Research on Women and Gender at the University of Michigan provided funding that enabled me to travel to India and conduct observations with the Applied Theater India Foundation. And of course, my collaboration with the Applied Theater India Foundation has been essential for what I'm sharing with you all today. And specifically, Costa Benkapur has been my main contact and one of the key founders of the foundation. And also Vaishali Goswami is another key founder of the organization. Both of them were just instrumental in organizing my experiences in India. Okay. This is a brief overview of what we'll be covering today. So we've already had introductions, which is so lovely. So we'll ask you all to share a bit about yourselves, and then we will define applied theater. We'll talk about the relationship between applied theater and critical theory, critical praxis. We'll talk about applied theater in the United States and its relationship to social work. We'll talk about applied theater in India. And then we'll talk about the concepts of power, ethics, and resistance in relationship to applied theater. And then we'll wrap things up and turn it over to you all for questions. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to have, yep, thank you, Madison. Perfect. So yes, we would love to know who is in the room today. Watching folks answer the question.
I'll just jump in very quickly. If you don't see the poll, your options are alumni, SSW faculty or staff, SSW student, MSW or PhD, or other. Tell us in the chat. So if you don't see the poll question, feel free to put your response in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Madison. And something I forgot to mention is that, and I haven't mentioned this to my co-presenter yet either, but I think it'd be nice to have a little break halfway through our webinar today. So maybe around the 45-minute mark, we'll take a break. All right. Looks like the vast majority of folks are alumni. And then we have some social work faculty, School of Social Work faculty and staff in here. We have some students and then others. Yes, please tell us in the chat. So lovely to have a feel for that. Thank you for responding. Okay. All right. I'm going to move into, so you already know who we are. So I'm going to shift ahead to a somatic arrival. So this is something I like to do at the beginning of each of my class sessions, and it's an important component to applied theater. So applied theater is an embodied way of generating knowledge, of being in community with each other. And in academic spaces, we have a tendency to ignore the body, yet so much happens with our bodies. And so this somatic arrival is a chance to bring our minds into conversation with our bodies and to be fully present with one another today. So I'm going to guide us through a brief exercise, and you are happy to have you participate, or you don't have to participate. Participate at any level you wish. Okay. So as you are willing and able, I ask that you sit with your feet on the ground, straighten your back, straighten your back all the way so that the back of your head, it feels like there's a balloon tied to the very top of your head. So your neck becomes very, very long. And then contrast that by grounding the bottom of your spine down towards the ground. Okay. All right. Gently set one hand, it can be your right or left hand, over your heart. And then gently set your other hand on your belly. And we're going to do 3 deep inhales and exhales together. And as we're doing this, I would encourage you to either close your eyes or soften your gaze. And I will count you through the inhales. Okay. So let's start. Here we go. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for a second. And exhale 2, 3, 4. And hold for a second. And inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold and exhale 2, 3, 4. Hold. One more. Inhale 2, 3, 4, and hold. Last exhale and exhale 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I hope we're a little bit more grounded in our bodies and ready for this trip we're going to take. Okay. Would like to share a cultural humility commitment to doing this work. And how we define cultural humility is it assumes we engage in ongoing learning. There's no arrival time when it comes to understanding communities or lived experiences different from our own. And when entering an Indian applied theater practice, we are entering the Indian applied theater practice as learners, not as authorities. And we're acknowledging what we cannot know from the outside as outsiders. And want to note that borrowing from other cultures happens. It's something that it's human. It happens constantly. But what we need to acknowledge are the power dynamics that come with interacting with other cultures and engaging with art forms. And think about who is benefiting from these methodologies that we're engaging with, who is being credited with this work, and what might be getting lost. Okay. And ways to keep these acknowledgements in place is through attribution, naming the lineages of the methodologies we're using, and make sure we're doing this through relationship and not commodifying these methodologies. Okay. All right. And just a brief review of the objectives for this workshop. So one is to explore the connections between applied theater practices and social work values. Another is to apply critical theory frameworks to understand applied theater as a tool for structural change. And the third is to evaluate power dynamics and ethical considerations in transnational applied theater practice. Okay. All right. Now, a quick definition of what is applied theater. Okay. I'm going to assume that most of you have an idea of what theater as a performing art is, but applied theater is a specific type. All right. So, the main goal of applied theater is to make a difference in our lives, right? It's not art for the sake of art, but it has a purpose. And it usually involves theater practitioners and participants without any theater experience. Okay, so you do not have to have any theater training at all to be part of an applied theater project. Okay. And it usually takes place in unconventional spaces like a school gymnasium or out on the streets or in a healthcare setting. Okay. And the creation of applied theater happens through collective creation. So applied theater doesn't use an established script written by Shakespeare or Eugene O'Neill. Rather, the participants come together to create a script or create a performance. And the main goal is to use theater to solve issues or problems. Okay. And applied theater has a few key core commitments, and that includes um, acknowledging the community as both the subject and creator of the work, right? So the community generates the project, generates the theater. And performance is a form of knowledge production. It may not be a mainstream form of knowledge production like writing or using numbers, but it definitely is, it involves storytelling and passing information along. Theater is designed to generate reflection and then action. Okay, so there is a methodology and a theory behind applied theater. And this framework, this theory often follows a cyclical process, right? And it's not linear like many cycles, and often you can backtrack and have to start a step again. But it usually begins with naming an issue, creating theater that illustrates the issue. So that's where the rehearse comes in. You rehearse this illustration. And then creating a theatrical intervention to the issue, and then reflecting on the feasibility of this intervention. Does this proposed intervention work for this community? And then repeat as needed. Okay. And the types of applied theater we're discussing today are really rooted in the methodologies of Augusto Boal, Paulo Freire, and other community-based traditions. Okay. This is a brief overview of the applied theater landscape, primarily in the United States, but this also applies to India as well. We're going to be focusing mostly on theater of the oppressed today, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. But other very common types include theater in education, which emerged in Eastern Europe, Yugoslavia during the 1960s. And it was theater made by youth for youth. And educators encouraged students to use theater to help them develop new curricular programs, new approaches to teaching and learning. So there's, a long history of using theater in education. And then an approach that we've seen more of in the late 20th century into the 21st century is called documentary verbatim theater. And that is theater derived from data that is collected through observations, through lived experiences, through oral histories, through interviews, through court transcripts. So it's taking people's documented experiences and developing a script out of that and then performing it for the larger community. And one example of that, I saw a verbatim theater play, and it was derived from it was from the the testimonies of Anita Hill and Thomas Clarence back in the 1990s. And so it was just a brilliantly conceived production using the actual words from those trials. So a very powerful piece. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the relationship between applied theater and critical theory. So, and we'll talk a bit about why critical theory, why we're focusing on that. So, first of all, critical theory interrogates systems of power and oppression to imagine and enact more just alternatives. So, just based on that definition, there's a very natural relationship between critical theory and applied theater. So, and also as social workers, we are interacting with critical theory constantly when thinking about the problems our clients face, the problems communities we work with are navigating, which social policies could be reimagined to help more people. We're looking at the structural issues that shape the living conditions of the people we work with. All right. And then no conversation is complete about applied theater without talking about pedagogy of the oppressed. Okay. And this is a key text written by Paulo Freire, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But it really established the framework for what became theater of the oppressed, which was created by Augusto Boal. And Freire and Boal were close colleagues and friends and worked carefully together on creating these frameworks and methodologies. And so let's jump into that a little bit. So Freire is just, as educators, as social workers, very influential person. Although Freire was working in education, I think pedagogy of the press applies to much of what we do in social work as well. Freire lived in Brazil and was working as a very influential educator. And it was during an oppressive dictatorship in the 1960s, 1970s, and was very outspoken and really, very resistant to this dictatorship. And so was exiled from his position in Sao Paulo and was sent to the rural parts of Brazil to teach reading and writing to farm workers. And Freire took this as an opportunity to not just teach reading and writing to the farm workers, but to raise their critical awareness about the structural conditions creating harm to them, causing oppression for them and their lives. And so created this methodology that both taught reading and writing, but raised their critical consciousness about how social systems, institutions, social policies either benefit certain groups and oppress others, and how these people were being oppressed by current policies. Okay. And this is a graphic demonstrating Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed and how it works. And I'm spending some time on this because it's very much in alignment with how applied theater works as well. So the methodology starts with if you're working with a group of people, either as an educator, a social worker, or a theater practitioner doing applied theater, you start off by asking the participants to recognize situations they find limiting. What is happening in your life that feels either uncomfortable, untenable, extremely unfair, harmful, so on and so forth. And then Freire would ask folks to name what's happening. What are words that go with these situations? And then would use those words to teach the reading and writing. And then through learning these words, through discussing these situations, conscientization would occur. And that's a long word for critical consciousness. And that is where a person's consciousness about the structures and the external forces shaping their life is raised so that they see a direct link between their personal experiences with an issue to social policies, to systems, to institutions. Okay. And it is through this conscientization that Freire would engage folks in a dialogue about asking, what can we do about these limit situations, right? So as a group, what's within our sphere of control? And so it's not just about having a new critical awareness, but it's about creating a plan of action. So what do we do with this new critical awareness? And so the idea is that folks would, in this process with not only literacy, but with a new awareness and power to then engage in change, progressive transformative change as well. Okay. So let's parallel this to Augusto Boal's work. Augusto Boal is the person behind Theater of the Oppressed. And so Boal was living in Brazil around the same time as Freire. And like I said, they were close colleagues. And Boal was deeply influenced by Pedagogy of the Oppressed and really saw theater as a mechanism where the conscientization and praxis could be deeply felt and embodied, right? So since theater is such an embodied way of engaging with a community, it just felt like a natural progression to overlap these frameworks. So yes, so Freire or Boal's framework is very similar to Freire's, right? There are just a few key differences. So Boal worked with actors and non-actors, did a lot of work with folks who'd had no theater experience at all, and would again work with these communities and say, okay, what's going on in your lives right now that are, what's really concerning you? What's causing you harm? And so identifying key situations. And then Boal would work with folks to create theatrical scenarios that illustrate these oppressive situations. And so, of course, through the process of creating these scenarios and performing them, a new critical awareness about the root causes of these limiting situations would emerge. Like what is causing this issue? But then also there would be lots of dialogue about why these situations exist, but also what can we do to address these issues. And so through that critical awareness, we start moving into praxis. And praxis is where the action occurs. And so then not only do the performers create scenarios illustrating the problems, they create scenarios illustrating what could address the problem, right? What are interventions that we could perform that would actually create change? So then the performances become a rehearsal for actual social action, for community change. Okay. All right. So I just gave a nice overview of key frameworks related to applied theater, and I'm going to turn it over to Apara right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. C. So we heard a little bit about kind of the theoretical underpinnings of applied theater, and particularly focusing on how it is a method, a medium to bring forth the situation limits, the kind of oppression that exists, or various social issues that exist within societies, and reimagining ways to address these issues, and kind of thinking then into like what actions could be taken to address these issues. That at the core really aligns with various social work values, particularly focusing on kind of the three we've highlighted on the slide that NASW also kind of mentions in our code of ethics, right? So thinking about applied theater as a medium to bring about that critical consciousness. So social workers promote social justice and social change with and on behalf of clients, striving to end discrimination, oppression, poverty, and other forms of social injustice. And so applied theater really closely aligns with this in the sense that interactive theatrical approaches, these embodied theatrical approaches, really engages in world building across different times, spaces, issues, and emotions. These embodied expressiveness that happens within applied theater allows social workers and the communities that they engage with to imagine and enact the various possibilities for social change. And so then applied theater really becomes that medium to recognize the oppression and also an exploration of how to change it. What can we be done about it? And there's this collective knowledge creation that happens about how social justice issues can be addressed. Similarly, with applied theater is a very relational practice. It really centers the human relationship, and it is very participatory and embodied in nature. And so it really conceptualizes relationships as a vehicle for social change. And so applied theater, talking about its relational nature, builds on this call and response between the audience and the performer, kind of talking about this not working from a script, so to speak, but building on that dialogue, calling on people in the audience to respond to a certain situation being enacted on the stage, imagining what alternatives of that situation could look like, or solutions for the problems being enacted on stage could look like. So really kind of focusing on that interconnectedness between people, right? So each interaction within applied theater spaces is unique because people bring their own experiences, their own hopes and desires. And so applied theater as a practice results in strengthened relationships, a sense of collective humanity, and a recognition of human relationships and that interconnectedness that social work really values as well. And then going on to kind of thinking about the dignity and worth of the person, applied theater really centers the voices, stories, and humanities of individuals. As applied theater practitioners, there's an expectation of safeguarding the dignity and the rights of participants, acknowledging various positionalities, and cultivating cultural humility when participants engage. And so really focusing on what these stories mean for the people in the audience, or what is being enacted, what does that say about whose voice is being heard, what stories are being brought forth, and really centering the humanity of the people in acting and reimagining these issues. Next slide, please. And I'll pass it back to Dr. C to talk about applied theater in US social work.
Amazing. That was so good, Apara. Thank you. And I forgot to mention this earlier. So Apara has been working with me as a research assistant this year, helping me with this project in India. So, and just, I'm so thrilled Apara is able to do this presentation with me today. So glad to. Yes. So applied theater in the United States and the relationship to social work. So, okay. So actually, there is a long history of applied theater in social work. So, and this is new knowledge to me, actually, that the Whole House in Chicago used theater, actually had a theater, Whole House Theater Company, that was founded back in 1889 in Chicago. And so, drama, music, the arts were used as tools for community building, cross-cultural dialogue, and civic engagement with immigrant communities. And then zooming into the 19th century, we had the Federal Theater Project, which was part of the New Deal. And this project employed thousands of theater workers and brought performance directly to working class and communities who were impoverished. And they had a performance called The Living Newspaper, which dramatized housing issues, labor rights, public health concerns. Oh. And then sort of moving into the mid-20th century and the civil rights and labor organizing movements, we see applied theater take a very strong political stance. We have the Free Southern Theater, which is founded by civil rights activists connected to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which brought theater to Black communities in the Deep South and used it as a tool for civil rights organizing. And then around that same time, we have El Teatro Campesino in California, which emerged from the United Farm Workers movement. And they used short performances called actos to organize farm workers. And this was very similar to what Boal was conceiving in Brazil at the same time on how to use theater to illustrate interventions into social problems. And then more recent history, in 1979, the North American Drama Therapy Association was founded. So really, the relationship between theater and clinical interventions was made formal. And then during the 1980s, we have, the historic ACT UP groups and related groups using street theater, including die-ins and other types of performance activism to raise consciousness about policy advocacy and funding for HIV and AIDS. And then we have the Pedagogy and Theater of the Oppressed organization, which was founded in 1995. And that's an organization that I've been actively involved with for many years now. And they are, they create a bridge between academia and applied theater practitioners. And they hold an annual conference every year over the summer where folks who love doing applied theater, theater of the oppressed, come together and share methodologies and performances. And so there's a lot of learning that occurs there. Okay. And then this is an overview of some current applied theater projects that you could look into if you're interested. So we have the Roadside Theater in Appalachia that centers community-based storytelling and documentary theater. We have Urban Bush Women, which is phenomenal if you have a chance to see them perform, using performance and community engagement that centers Black women and primarily uses dance, but some theatrical elements as well. And then the Ping Chong and Company uses verbatim and documentary theater with marginalized communities. And then there are many, many prison theater programs throughout the United States. So, and then of course, here at the University of Michigan, we have the Prison Creative Arts Project, which I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. So I'm going to share a couple of case examples of applied theater in the United States where there's an overlap with social work values and I guess intended outcomes too, I would say. So I mentioned earlier at UMich, we have the Prison Creative Arts Project, which was founded in 1990 with a single theater workshop. And it has grown, over the decades, it has really grown to include theater workshops in many of the state prisons in Michigan, also in the Milan Federal Prison. But not only theater, they now implement creative writing workshops and art making workshops, visual art making workshops. And the art workshops have grown into a way for folks who are incarcerated to actually make money by selling their artwork to the general public. So, and I'm going to show just a brief video illustrating some of the work by the Prison Creative Arts Project, just so you get a feel for it. And so I might need a little help. So I know the audio settings. I'm going to go into audio settings real quick. I always struggle with this. Okay, maybe I'm trying to think here. Share computer sound. Okay, I think that's going to work. Stereo high fidelity. Okay, let's give this a try. Can you all hear that?
So I got involved with PCAP about a year ago. I have a long background in the arts, especially the performing arts and theater. And I got involved with PCAP because I believe
Does that sound okay, Apara? It does. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Great.
So I got involved with PCAP about a year ago. I have a long background in the arts, especially the performing arts and theater. And I got involved with PCAP because I believe that everyone should have the right to create art and to make their stories heard. And I have met a lot of really cool people. So, I was really happy to do an event like this at the art fair and to get people performing.
Hey, Dr. Christensen, I
Yeah.
think the video froze.
I'm the Associate Director of
dear.
American Friends Service.
Darn, it's possible my internet isn't strong enough. I'm going to exit the full screen. Sorry about that and see if that helps a little bit. Okay. Yes. I'm going to roll it back just a bit. Okay. Let's see if this helps.
Got involved with
How is
PCAP
that?
because I believe that everyone should have the right to create art and to make their stories heard. And I have met a lot of really cool people. So, I was really happy to do an event like this at the art fair and to get people performing.
I'm Pete Martell. I'm the Associate Director of American Friends Service Committee, Michigan Criminal Justice Program. I'm formerly incarcerated. I was locked up for 14 years here in Michigan. And at AFSC, I learned about them when I was inside.
When you're down and out.
I decided to join because I believe that music is a powerful tool. It connects with culture, connects with, it's very persuasive. I grew up going to church, and I know music's power when used in that setting, and I think it's just really cool. Now I listen to protest music.
Fall guys, been there for a long time in the streets, those loves. So now this is my elevation, so I'm overpaying that fall guy position, and I'm purple, so I'm elevating. It's the word.
Mind and hardened, lost boys with spirits crushed.
Of having gone through the process of incarceration and being released, and now being successful, being part of a community that really everyone coming out needs.
Yesterday was not real, so today shall be savored. Tonight might be swell, but this morning was favored. I think you were born for breakfast. You're the most important meal. You've edified my investments in my purpose.
So without further ado, Jocelyn Walker.
The view of the world was wrapped in green, young and naive, but determined nonetheless, trying to appease everyone, only stirring up a mess.
How y'all doing today? I'm Kenyon Jackson from Ypsilanti, Michigan. And you can find me in the inner city of Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, Michigan. I'm here today to shine some light on the guys who just came home from prison and that's doing a big one.
My name is Johnny Van Patten.
All right, I'm gonna, that gives you a taste of that, of the Prison Creative Arts Project. So, and actually what I'd like to do, so we're at a 45-minute mark, is just, take a 10-minute break and then resume here at 3:55, if that sounds okay. So and then we'll look at one more case study, but I hope I'm going to stop sharing and we'll see you all in 10 minutes. Okay, 3:55. See you soon. Okay, we are going to get started. So I will share my screen again. Okay, excellent. Okay, all right. So I would like to share another example of applied theater in the United States where there was a social work overlap. Um, so when I did my PhD at the University of Utah, as part of my dissertation project, I co-developed a theater-based sexual assault prevention intervention. I worked with college students, undergraduate and graduate students, and used theater of the oppressed as the main methodology, and a specific method called forum theater. And I have a brief video that illustrates what this project was like. So I'm going to share that with you all.
Today we're having something a little different than what we've been doing before. It is a student group called Revolution.
I really want to create a sexual assault prevention program that energizes this campus, that energizes undergraduate students.
Let your arms help you cover a different space in the room. Look with your eyes. Okay, we're going to change this game a little bit.
Revolution is an interactive presentation
that's working to stop sexual assault on our campus.
We use theater techniques.
Now or never. All right.
We act out scenes.
You went all out.
And then we deconstruct the scenes with the audience.
And this involves
very close.
The audience members getting up on stage, moving around, using their bodies.
You want to pick a friend, and you want to pick an enemy. The current theme that we revolve around are typical scenes.
Where is this coming from? I just asked if you wanted to have a drink.
That might be seen in the lives of students on campus.
We present the scenarios the first time around.
I'm going to go back to the... Wait, stop. And change what happens in the scenes.
It's kind of troublesome that as
by getting advice from people in the audience.
It really allows the audience to place themselves in someone's shoes.
Something really bad happened. I don't know what it is.
And then also interacting with the actual scenarios where the audience members can yell freeze and make suggestions for how the scenario can be changed and have a more positive outcome. Hopefully change behaviors that perpetuate sexual assault.
I think it's so important to have students involved in addressing this issue.
There is a lot of research that shows that peer education is the most effective way to change attitudes within a college-age population.
Because I think what happens when they get involved in that way, when they're in a situation that would call for some kind of action or response, they're more likely to do that.
College students are much more willing to listen to and engage with their peers than they are with professors, with authority figures, especially on a topic as sensitive as sexual assault.
If they're just getting information that they can't relate to their everyday lives and experiences, it may be more difficult for them to see themselves intervening or even having the courage to step up to someone and say what's happening here is not okay.
I try and reach out to other males and say this is something that we need to change because largely males are the ones causing the problem.
I think we don't want to think about students on our campus being vulnerable to this, but they are. And so rather than pretend that that's not the case, I love the idea of being proactive and saying that this is the case. And as such, we want to be proactive in making sure that they know on our campus we are doing something to address this.
We create change. This is a developing form of rape prevention, but it so far seems to be really stirring up the people that we encounter.
The answers came from the audience, and I think when we're going in and talking with undergraduate students about this issue, I think many of them will feel the same way, that I wouldn't know what to do, and then they either participate and realize that they do, or they watch someone else that they think, well, I knew that, and they realize I can have an impact on changing the level of violence on this campus. I think that's amazing.
Now we're gonna...
So apologies for the lack of closed captions on that video. It was developed many years ago. So anyway, so that gives you a feeling for the scope of applied theater in the United States and how it overlaps with social work as well. So we have our first reflection question. I think, Para, is this you or Madison? I can't remember how this works. Thank you, Madison.
Yeah, so I did put it as a poll. It's a short answer poll. For everybody that cannot see the poll, you can also put your response in the chat.
Thank you so much. Great. Yeah, that's great. And so I'm going to, so I'm looking at the chat and there are a few things coming up here, which is fun. Yeah, so desire to see a whole scene played out, absolutely. Asking about how it can be applied to therapy, children's therapy. Love seeing men involved with sexual assault prevention. Yes, yes. Yeah, creative way to process, totally new. Excellent. Yeah, thank you for chiming into the chat. It's good to hear what's coming up for you all. So, excellent. Okay, just kind of seeing role play is a great way to build confidence. This would be a fun way to process with middle and high schoolers. Yes, adolescents are, yeah, they love this work. Have experience participating in psychodrama. And that's a good question that, and I think it'd be useful for me to bring this up. So, drama therapy or psychodrama is a specific type of theatrical clinical practice that it is distinct from applied theater and distinct from theater of the oppressed. They have different goals in that one is to address issues at the individual or psychological level, and applied theater, theater of the oppressed, is focused more on the mezzo community level, sometimes the macro level as well. But certainly they share values in making life better for people. So, all right. Looks like we wrapped up our poll. I'm going to share the results. And I'm curious, Madison, so it doesn't show the responses, but it shows that people answered. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was able to just pull the report. If you hit view details, do you have that option?
We're good. This is great.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you everybody for answering. So that'll be really interesting information for us to look at later. So excellent. Okay. Just a little shout out to Dipansha. Great to see you out there. I'm glad you're here. So, all right. So we're now going to talk about applied theater in the Indian context in India. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Apara.
Thank you. So theater as a whole in India has a very long history, kind of being woven into religious rituals, festivals, and then political campaigns, and more recently, developmental projects. Theatrical events are shaped by a collective labor and a shared symbolic meanings. These theatrical performances, they really blend together songs and dances and storytelling in spaces where entire communities gather. So this could be village centers or community schools and places like those. And in a more modern context, street theater and alternate forms of theater, such as applied theater or theater for development, has really kind of taken the center stage. And they're used as participatory tools to address various social justice issues or for development communication. So kind of getting a sense of what needs to be changed or where do we see our nation going towards, or kind of imagining and enacting the hopes and dreams of change in those ways. And this particularly comes from within post-colonial India, a shift from Western classical theater to the theater of the streets, which was really initiated by anti-fascist movement of the Communist Party of India under the canopy of Indian People's Theater Association. So street theater took on a form of political communication that made complex issues of hunger, famine, poetry, communal violence, colonial and feudal exploitations kind of the center stage, and created this impact on society that was deeply divided by class, caste, and religion, more approachable to people who actually experience these issues. And applied theater is one of those methods through which people have now been able to understand and respond to the problems that they are facing and exist. And I want to, next slide, please, bring attention to some kind of practitioners that within India that have shared about how theater really plays a role in the society. The first one says, many of us in Delhi did street theater, which was directly connected to visibilizing issues. I, along with many women in the Stree Satsang, Sankarsh, dealt with rape laws and dowry problems. This was from Anuradha Kapoor, who was talking on the direct connection between theater and political action in the 1970s and 80s. We saw a similar street theater movement in the Nirbhaya case, which was more recently in the 2010s, where women came to the street as a way of visibilizing issues around rape problems and rape laws. Similarly, the next quote there says, when the play was performed in residential colonies, there was an immediate connection and empathy. Many people reacted as if play was performing their reality. This was from Dipti Priya Mehrotra, recalling audience reactions to a play called Om Swaha. So plays in theater and these performances have been a way of reflecting the lived experiences of people in India, and that has been kind of developed further through kind of using these theoretical groundings of Freire and Boal to then be utilized to engage in visibilizing and enacting changes regarding various social justice issues. And I'll pass it back to Dr. C to kind of take us through a more structured history of theater and how that has kind of become this social practice in India.
Lovely work, Laura. Thank you. So I have a similar timeline as the United States applied theater. Theater has an ancient history in India. And really we have, sort of early records going back to the Natya Shastra Bhurata Muni, which is a foundational Sanskrit treatise on performance, establishing theater as a sacred and social practice. And then moving forward a few centuries, we have Kudyatam in Kerala, which is in southern India, which is one of the world's oldest living theater traditions, recognized by UNESCO, rooted in Sanskrit drama, performed in temples, and it connects performance to ritual, community memory, and spiritual practice. And then moving into more of the Middle Ages, we have just folk theater traditions emerging across all parts of the country. And these are just indigenous forms of expression, really rooted in specific community experiences connected to religion, the region, geography, nature, all of those things. Then we move to the colonial era, which is during the time the British Empire was colonizing India, 19th century into the 20th century. And we have Rabindranath Tagore Santini Ketan, and Tagore is a person who developed a philosophy of theater's education and community practice, and also merging it with social pedagogy. So very social work focused, right? How do we use theater for social emotional development? And then a very, very important emergence occurred during World War II in India, and that's the Indian People's Theatre Association. And just the impact of this organization cannot be overstated. So it was founded by communist and progressive artists during World War II to mobilize communities against colonialism, famine, and fascism. The organization brought together musicians, playwrights, and theater makers across India to use performance as a tool for political organizing and consciousness raising. Widely considered to be the founding moment of modern applied theater in India. And then in the 1950s, we have Sangeet Natak Akademi founded a national organization that documented, preserved, and supported India's diverse theater traditions. And then into the 1960s and 70s, Badal Sarkar developed the Third Theater in Calcutta. And that theater company rejected Western approaches to applied theater. So that included the traditional proscenium stage, which is what we all see when we go to a traditional theater, where there's a clear separation between the audience and the performers. So there was a rejection of that separation. And focused and really was in favor of free theater in open spaces, working with working class and communities living in poverty. So then into the 1950s, we have Habib Tanvir, who developed the Naya Theater, which is still in operation today, and really merged folk theater traditions with political theater. And sort of moving into late 20th century, Jana Sanskriti was founded. And Apar is going to talk a bit about Jana Sanskriti in a minute. And Jana Sanskriti is one of the largest theater of the oppressed organizations in the world. Like the scope and influence they've had throughout the country is enormous. And Jana Sanskriti, Sanjoy Ganguly worked directly with Augusto Boal and now works with his son, Julian Boal, and do just transnational projects. And every other year, Jana Sanskriti has a world conference on theater of the oppressed in Calcutta, India. All right. So in addition to that, non-government organizations and civil society applied theater projects have been popping up since the 90s into the 21st century. And these are projects focused on social issues like health education, gender justice, children's rights. And then that brings us to the present, to the Applied Theater India Foundation, which I'm going to talk to you all about in a minute. So I'm going to turn over to Apara.
Thank you, Dr. C. Yep, so Jana Sanskriti is one particular organization that really is really engaging in theater of the oppressed movement in India. So the Jana Sanskriti Center for Theater of the Oppressed was founded in 1985 in West Bengal, and it is the first and the largest theater of the oppressed movement in India. So they use participatory performances to address social injustice and empower marginalized communities. It was founded by Sanjoy Ganguly, who it began as a rural cultural movement that viewed theater as a rehearsal for democracy. They have this central guiding belief that every individual possesses this innate perfection, this capability of confronting oppression when awakened through collective art making. In the last 40 years or so, Jana Sanskriti has engaged in communities in rural West Bengal to address critical issues like child marriage, domestic violence, child trafficking, maternal and child health, and alcoholism. They have about 30 satellite theater teams that reach approximately an audience of 200,000 people all across West Bengal and more. Jana Sanskriti uses the methodology of repeated creative engagement to not only initiate public discussion, but also to foster critical thinking among the people in the area. They also use that to promote community-led actions. So they turn these performances that they do and the feedback that they receive and the engagement that they receive, they turn it back into that action, to community-led actions on the ground. Every 2 years, Jana Sanskriti hosts the Muktadhara International Forum Theater Festival. Sorry, let me say that again. Muktadhara International Forum Theater Festival near Kolkata. This event attracts practitioners and academics worldwide for performances, workshops, and exchanges exploring theater of the oppressed's evolving forms. So the next slide, we have a short video that highlights this theater festival that happened in 2026.
Great, thank you. Great.
We have a very big global community, the presence of which can be seen in 80 different countries in the world. We also formed a Federation of Theatre of the Oppressed in 2006, where Augusto Boal was present, and he celebrated the birth of Federation of Theatre of the Oppressed in India, where we find groups located in various states using this theatre form in order to democratize their political action.
Claudia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
দীপান্তরের মাঠে বধূ
this festival.
থাকি
Working with Jana Sanskriti, I think it really went beyond my expectations. Jana Sanskriti and people who helped in organizing this festival, they have managed to give us a very warm welcome.
I think that what makes Jana Sanskriti so special is actually a part of everything that my friend said. It's actually their aesthetic. They have managed to use forum theater, but to integrate it with a very high level of aesthetic, of theatrical aesthetic.
Their dedication, and they do it for 31 years.
For the sake of time, I won't show the whole thing, but that gives you a taste of what that World Festival is like every other year. So that's Jana Sanskriti. I'm going to talk to you all about the Applied Theatre India Foundation and just a bit of background on how I came to know this organization. I was conducting a study focused on applied theater practitioners' use of applied theater to address gender-based violence. And I met Kostub from the Applied Theater Foundation. My research assistant at the time, Arushi, just threw a giant net out in terms of recruitment just all over the world. And we connected with Kostub, and Kostub said, you should come to India and see what we're doing. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And then this conversation just kept unfolding. And then I got the funding from the Institute for Research on Women and Gender and was able to visit this past October. And I conducted field observations using an ethnographic methodology. And Apara, Kostub, and I are currently writing a case study based upon my observations, some interviews we've done with Kostub. So, and then Kostub, we will likely be visiting the university in this coming September, University of Michigan. So this is an overview of the organization. So they offer a diploma in applied theater, and anybody, it is open globally, like anybody across the planet can participate in this diploma. There are some logistical issues to consider, though. And so they have this diploma, and then they have a train the trainer workshop they offer. And then they also work with teachers in K through 12 on how to integrate applied theater into schools. So I got to observe 4 projects related to the foundation, and I'm going to talk about 2 of these projects. So one was with the Modern College of Arts and Science and Commerce, and then the other was the Deep Griha Academy. So the project with the Modern College, this is a university in Pune, India, and this is a workshop. It's an applied theater workshop with undergraduate students studying chemistry. And the focus was job market preparation. And so the workshop used embodied, affective, focused workshops to bolster confidence and to increase emotional competence of the students. And they scaffolded the theater games towards increasing complexity. And here are a few photos from that workshop. So these are students. They did a warm-up exercise of blowing up balloons and then bouncing them around with each other. And so there was a focus on breath. There was a focus on, what do you feel in your body right now? What does it feel like to be bouncing balloons with each other? So building relationships, having trust, things. And that's just one of the warm-up exercises. And then they scaffolded to greater complexity where they started acting out scenarios, different professions that people were dreaming of stepping into once they graduate. So, and then the Deep Griha Academy is it's a school for preschool through 8th grade students. It's an English medium co-ed school. And the Superintendent Angela completed the Applied Theater Diploma through ATIF. And Angela was just sold on applied theater as a pedagogical method that encourages creativity, collaboration, and emotional social development. And so some ATIF alums were implementing 90-minute workshops at the Deep Griha Academy with 4th grade students. And these were 90-minute workshops once a week. So I got to observe some of those. And so these are some, this is what we call image theater, which is a technique from Theater of the Oppressed, where students are encouraged to make shapes that address a certain topic. And here is image theater evolving into movement. So in this first photo to the left, students were asked to create a bridge. And then Vishali showed the students how the bridge could be used, like actually walking across the bridge. So the focus was on team building, cooperation, collaboration. So those key social emotional skills. So I was quick, but and we're almost out of time. But we're here for our third poll and would love to get your responses to this one. So the question is, so if you can't see the poll, the question is, what struck you most about the India example? Learning about applied theater in India. So I know, and that might take a minute to think about and answer. And of course, if you prefer to answer in the chat, that would be great. So, yeah.
I will add in too. So this question is the what struck you most, and then I have another poll question with the second question. So we'll do this one first, and then we'll go into the second one with the when you enter a community that is not your own question.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. Right. Appreciate folks answering this question. Mm-hmm. And as you all are answering this question, there's a really good question in the chat that I want to follow up, Shoshana. So I'm just going to read it out loud. So I'd love to know about more documented cases where theater and the arts clearly lead to policy change. I value expression and connection, just looking for more macro level change. So what I'll say to that is that applied theater is one tool of many that we need in order to create policy change or any type of community change. So it's not a linear path. It's similar to all of the community change efforts that we see, like protests, mass mobilization, popular education, teach-ins, community capacity development. You don't see an immediate line from that intervention to change at the policy level. But what you do see is an accumulation of change that over time occurs. And theater by no means is a magic bullet, not by any stretch, not just like any other intervention, but when done in tandem with other approaches to social change, it's very, very powerful. But the unique thing that theater brings is that it is embodied, it's aesthetic, it's evocative, you're leading with the community's stories. And I could go on and on about that, but that's a really good question. So, yeah.
I also wanted to quickly mention within there the idea of legislative theater, which is a form within applied theater, which the performances particularly focus on informing policy decisions. And this is kind of some of the work of legislative theater in particular we can see in Brazil, where there are laws passed around protection against discrimination. Also, I think there was one particular one that I remember reading was around policies around services for homelessness in Greater Manchester area in the UK. So there are some particular examples where series of legislative theater processes have contributed to more direct policy change in that way, because that's kind of at the root of legislative theater. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Apara. Yes, I love that you brought up legislative theater. Yes, and there's actually a lot of documentation about Ball's early work using that for policy change. Good. And there's a lot more to cover and to talk about, and I apologize for the shortness of time, but we have a few minutes left. I thought I'm going to stop sharing and just open it up to questions. So I know folks have been typing in the chat, which I really appreciate, but would love to use these last few minutes and see what's coming up for you all. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Something I do want to share, actually, Apara, we should share. I'm going to share really quick my screen really quick. So there is a table that one of my former students created, and it's a crosswalk of social work practices, transformative mezzo level community practices, and applied theater practices. And we developed it for a paper I wrote, but so we're going to share this table with all of you. So this is kind of just a little way of seeing the connection between social work and applied theater. And then we also have a resource sheet. And so you've got that one, Apara. Great. Okay, I'll share the table, and then Apara, if you can share the resource sheet, that would be great. Great. And so the resource sheet basically has our references, and let me make sure I have the right anyone. Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah, we really appreciate you all for being here today. So here's the table. And then, yeah, great.
I'm going to launch the final poll, which I know was at the end of your presentation, Dr. Christensen. So I'm going to launch it now. The question is, what is one thing you're carrying from this workshop into your practice? Perfect. So again, this is another short answer one. You can put it in the poll response or in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Matt. Mm-hmm. Thanks, folks. Appreciate your feedback and your engagement. Good. Let me, I'm going to put my email in the chat too. Like if anyone has any follow-up questions, you want to talk about any of this, please follow up with me. So, yeah. Great to see so many familiar names in the chat. Oh. Hmm.
I'm going to end this poll. And I want to thank you, Dr. Christensen and Apara, for presenting today. This was really informative. And thank you to everybody that attended this session and the other sessions of Building Healthy, Strong Communities. In the next couple of weeks, those who have met the attendance requirements will receive an email from our continuing education office. Any questions regarding CE should be directed to the CE office. You will get an email later with their email address. And thank you for attending today. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Christensen and Apara if you have any final things to say.
Gosh, no, just a big thank you to you, Madison, for organizing all this and all the logistics. And Joe, a big thank you to you for this invitation. It was.
Well, thank you for this presentation. I learned so much. I read your dissertation, so I knew something about this, but this was a really great presentation. I really enjoyed it a lot.
I'm so glad. So glad.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.